I did not immediately confer with flesh and blood, and I did not go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went to Arabia and returned again to Damascus. So Paul acknowledges that even though his life was on a different track, God had called him and separated him from his mother with the specific purpose of being the apostle to the Gentiles. So once again, we see that God's call in his life began from the womb, and it was that separation from his mother that was the initial point where he could begin his own life, and God began calling and working with him specifically. Before we go in to the specific reflexes now, I would like to show you some of the videos the first video that will help give us an understanding of some of the anatomy that we're going to be dealing with, and then we'll look at how these reflexes are actually put together.
Deep within the abdominal cavity lies the uterus, home for the baby. A group of very important ligaments anchor the uterus to the bony pelvis. The two largest ligaments are the broad ligaments in the back and the round ligaments in the front. While these ligaments provide little gravitational support, they do allow for dynamic motion of the uterus. In order for a baby to move freely and a mother to stay pain-free, it's important that these ligaments remain in a state of balance from side to side and front to back. Imagine for a moment that the pear-shaped uterus is a hot air balloon. The balloon is tethered to the ground to ensure that it will not float away. If someone does not anchor the balloon properly, it will tip over. Likewise, if the uterine ligaments are not balanced from side to side or front to back, the uterus will also tip over, either to the front, back, or side of the mother's abdomen. The mother may be aware that she has a tipped uterus, but she may not recognize the uncomfortable effect this position will have on the growing baby within her uterus. If there is an increase in the tension of the round ligaments which attach the uterus to the pelvis in the front, the mother may experience pain in her thigh, abdominal cramping, cervical pressure, or premature contractions. On the other hand, if there is an increase in the tension of the broad ligaments that attach the uterus to the sacrum, the mother may begin to experience extreme back pain during the pregnancy. And finally, if a ligament on one side of the body contracts more than the other side, the uterus will be pulled sideways. This off-centers the baby and causes the mother rib or hip pain. If this happens, the baby will have to flex and rotate his head to get through the birth canal. Later, he may develop torticollis and a flattened skull as a result of this sustained position in utero.
See the severe rounding on the one side and flat on the other?
Are muscles that fit like a series of hammocks within the pelvic bowl. The deepest layer runs obliquely from the sacrum to the ilium. The middle layer is anchored from side to side, and the top layer is anchored from the front to the back of the pelvis. These muscles support the uterus against gravity, mold the baby's cranial plates during the last trimester, and guide the baby smoothly through the birth canal.
Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the uterus, the broad ligament, the round ligament, and that you've seen some of the placement of how the baby is in there and how the mother and the baby interrelationship is affected by the structure of one. The mother's structure can affect where the baby sits, and if the baby's in the wrong position, that can also cause the mother pain. So let's begin to look at some of these reflexes that will assist the baby during birth, first of all. The first two reflexes are the placing reflexes and the stepping reflex. These are technically two separate ones, but for the purpose of our discussion, we're going to look at them together. The first one, the stepping reflex, if you touch the top of the baby's foot to the bottom of a table or surface, they will actually step up and put both feet flat on that surface, like they're taking a step. This reflex is seen from shortly after birth until about 6 weeks. So this one is only present very shortly and quickly after the baby's born. And then the stepping reflex is very similar to this, If you put both of the baby's feet on a flat surface, then they will actually step one up and then the other, that they'll bend one and put it back down as if they're walking. And this is present a little bit longer than the placing, for about 8 weeks. These reflexes and if they reappear after they have disappeared, it could be a sign that there has been trauma to the nervous system or to the brain. So that's, if a baby has a medical evaluation, they want to see that those reflexes are no longer present, or that could mean that there has been some more serious damage. How do these reflexes assist in birth? When the baby is folded up in utero and is in the very tight position as they approach birth, and as they start to stretch and wiggle around and try to flex their muscles again, they will push off against the top of the uterus a little bit. This will cause the head of the baby to put more pressure on the mother's cervix. And there are special nerves in the cervix that start to trigger, when they get lots of pressure on them, to start the contractions, and so that the baby can actually be born. And so then as they push off, it increases the pressure on the cervix, and they say, oh, the baby's really big. This must be time to start labor. And then as the uterus contracts around the baby, it puts even more pressure on the head, and it begins a positive feedback cycle, and that is how labor continues. So the placing and stepping reflexes are used at the very beginning of the birth process, and then also again at the very end. As the baby then extends, finally you'll see later there's one where they bend their head back, and when they give one final push off with that pressure on the top of the uterus, and that helps to propel them out of the birth canal. The next reflex is the asymmetric tonic neck reflex, or ATNR, and this one is also called the fencer reflex. For this reflex, what we do is that if the baby is laying on their back, and if you gently turn their head to one side, you will see the arm and leg on that side will straighten, and the other arm and leg will bend, that's why it's called the fencer reflex. This is useful for several different reasons. In the very early months after the baby is born, it prevents them from rolling over, because if they turn their head that way, then the